Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories. The investigation begins into South Korea's deadliest air disaster. 179 passengers killed after this plane crashes on landing. Our other headlines, Israeli forces continue to target hospitals in Gaza, killing at least 7 people in the latest strikes. Protests in Georgia as the country's new president is sworn in, while the incumbent has branded her successor illegitimate. And the new age of high-speed rail, China unveils the world's fastest train with a speed of 450 kilometers an hour. The investigation is now underway after the deadliest aviation disaster in South Korea. 179 passengers killed after a plane crashed on landing. The aircraft, arriving at Muan International Airport from Bangkok, was carrying 181 people, including 6 crew. 2 of the crew survived. A bird strike may have been a factor. The CEO of Jeju Air has apologized to the families.
Jeju Air will make every effort to resolve the situation quickly and support the family members of the passengers. In addition, we will do our best to find out the cause of the accident with the government.
Our correspondent Shane Harm is at Muan Airport.
Well, Jamie, as you can see behind me, investigators are working around the clock at the site of this deadly accident. They did say that we saw this airplane sort of skid off the runway and immediately burst into flames when it hit that concrete wall at the end of the runway. And what we see left of the plane's fuselage is the tail section of it. We know that the 2 survivors were found in that area of the plane. But if I go back to tell you, it's 181 passengers were on board, 6 crew members, 175 passengers coming in from Bangkok, Thailand on this Jeju Air flight. Jeju Air is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, low-budget airline here in South Korea. Coming in from Bangkok and was scheduled to arrive at 8:30 in the morning. Now, officials here have closed off Muan International Airport for any departing or arriving flights for the next couple of days. Also, a national period of mourning has been designated by the government. But the black box, the voice recorder, as well as the flight data recorder, all have been recovered. But it still is going to be months before we get an actual cause, because we know that there is speculation that a bird strike may have potentially contributed to this accident. We know from video that the landing gear didn't initiate when it skid on the runway at a very high rate of speed. So without jumping to conclusions and speculating, we know that investigators are working hard around the clock to find out the exact cause of this accident.
This is the first major test for South Korea's new acting president, who's only been in the job since Friday.
You're exactly right. Choi Sung-mok, he actually visited the site earlier today, and he's called for all-out efforts in terms of either investigative help or funding to determine the circumstances surrounding this tragic crash here. Like I said, he designated a 7-day period of mourning, but of course, South Korea is already going through a lot of tumultuous sort of events with martial law and, of course, with the impeachment of the president and the prime minister. And add to that, towards the end of the year where we've had this tragic event. So there really is this sort of sense of depression that's really coming down on the people here. So you can imagine that year-end celebrations will be muted. Obviously, a lot of the people that were on board this plane, we're hearing stories now of a family of 9 were on vacation returning from the warm weather in Thailand. We're hearing the youngest victim was 3 years old. So really now is a time for the country to mourn and come together and to really wrap their heads around what happened today.
David Learmount is the consulting editor at Flight Global and an international expert on aviation.
Well, something went very wrong with the airplane. We know that categorically because the pilot did declare a mayday. He also made one attempt to land on this runway and obviously decided that things were not going properly, so he went round again and then decided to land on the same runway but from the opposite direction. However, whatever it was that had gone wrong, possibly, that we're talking and we've heard about bird strike, and possibly the failure of one engine, and possibly even an incipient fire in one of the engines. But the pilot had his hands full. When he finally came in to land the final time, the aircraft it didn't have its undercarriage down, and I don't think that was an accident. I think they honestly couldn't put it down because there were probably no hydraulics because of the damage that had been done by the bird strike or whatever it was. And they also didn't have the flaps down. Those are the devices which enable the aircraft to land slowly. So the aircraft actually put down with no wheels, and very, very fast, much faster than normal. And what happened was that it went down. It was a beautiful landing, given the circumstances, wings perfectly level, and it slid the full length of the runway, almost undamaged, and it went over the very end of the runway, and less than 200 meters beyond it, it hit a wall, and that caused the airplane to break up and burst into flames. It was the wall that killed everybody, not the landing. If that wall had not been there, everybody would be alive now.
It does rather beg the question then why there might be a wall at admittedly the extreme end of a runway.
It does. It begs the question in a way which I've never seen anything quite like this before, because the wall was obviously incredibly substantial, and it wasn't just a wall. The instrument landing system antennae, the aerials, which provide guidance to pilots in bad weather to land, do precision approaches in bad weather without being able to see the runway until the last minute. Those aerials are normally just stuck into the ground, and they are collapsible. So if anybody does run over the end of the runway and hits these aerials, very little damage is caused by them. But in this particular case, it looks as if the aerials were embedded in a concrete structure, which was the cause of the disaster at the end of this accident sequence.
It's easy to think that planes are so highly automated and sophisticated that they can almost fly themselves. Clearly not.
No, I'm afraid we're still going to need pilots for a while, because, you see, things can go wrong. Hitting a flock of birds, which we think was at least a part of the factor in this, it causes damage. It looks as in this case it caused one engine to stop completely and possibly to be very badly damaged. It might even have caused some damage to the other, giving the pilot less power. But when the pilot put the aircraft down, although he didn't have the gear down, the undercarriage down, although he didn't have the flaps down, the touchdown itself was perfect. It was just very fast, and the aircraft skidded the full length of the runway on its belly, but you can survive that. Aircraft often have. And it went off the end of the runway, and the disaster came when it hit this really strong structure, solid structure, just off the end of the runway, right in the middle of the extended centre line of the runway. I don't know what it was, a structure like that was doing there.
Israel has launched new strikes on a number of hospitals in central Gaza, including Al-Wafa, where at least 7 people have reportedly died. The Israeli Defense Forces claim it targeted Hamas's command and control center. This comes days after forces raided Kamal Adwan, the last major hospital in northern Gaza. Our correspondent Rami Al-Magari is in Gaza.
The latest hospital coming under Israeli army fire. The Al-Wafa hospital for elderly Palestinians, elderly people, has been hit. The above store of the story of the hospital was hit, leading to the killing or claiming the lives of 7 Palestinians over there. Also, there was a report about the hitting of the Al-Ma'madani hospital, or the National Hospital, which is the main hospital in Gaza City, in the heart of Gaza City, by a tank fire from from the above of the hospital, on the above of the hospital, the rooftop of the hospital. Actually, these are the latest, actually, as you just mentioned. The Israeli army says that it was a command center for Hamas militants or Hamas leaders in Gaza City. This is not the only hospital. The Kamal Udwan hospital, the major hospital, the key hospital in northern Gaza was already emptied from the staff, the patients and everyone, and now it's being empty out of these people after the Israeli army stormed it and rounded up more than 200 people, including the director of the hospital himself, and then released many of them. In northern Gaza Strip, in Beit Hanun town, there is a new military action by the Israeli army, where the Israeli army has announced it is carrying out actions over there, leading to the death now so far of 17 people from 2 different families, and bombardment of some homes over there. Also bombardment took place in the other northern Gaza Strip towns. In Gaza City, there were strikes on different neighborhoods of Gaza City, leading to the death of at least 10 people in total. In central Gaza Strip, there was a strike on the Nusayrat refugee camp, in which 2 Palestinians, including a woman, were killed actually today. Other Israeli actions hit the southern Gaza Strip, in which 2 people were reportedly killed. These Israeli army actions continue unabated, as the Israeli army has been reportedly announced through Israeli media outlets that it will further expand its operations, its actions in Gaza City or in other parts of the Gaza Strip, while the talks for ceasefire are deadlocked so far between Israel, Hamas, mediated by Qatar, Egypt and somehow the United States.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office has denied the possibility of a limited hostage deal with Hamas. Protesters have gathered again in Tel Aviv overnight, demanding that an agreement to their return from Gaza is reached. Our correspondent Jonathan Regev is in Tel Aviv.
Over the weekend, the Prime Minister's office blamed Hamas for the fact that the negotiations, they've not failed, but they're not progressing either. What Israel is saying is that Hamas is not willing to present a list of living hostages, and therefore things cannot go forward. Hamas is saying that they need at least a week of ceasefire to gather information to find out who exactly he is alive and who's not, and they cannot do that before they get at least 7 days of a ceasefire. This is where things are standing. The families, however, as you mentioned, have protested again, as they do every Saturday night. And according to the families, this new Israeli demand regarding the list of living hostages is yet another, what they define as a sabotage attempt by the Prime Minister. The families are saying that every time that it seems that an agreement is about to be reached, Benjamin Netanyahu finds one or another reason to derail everything. Back in May, it was Rafah. After that, it was the Philadelphia corridor. Now they're speaking of a list. And what the families are saying is that everybody, all of the living hostages, should be brought back together. There should not be a distinction between humanitarian cases and non-humanitarian cases. Everyone is a humanitarian case, according to the families. This is especially true after parts of a report put together by the Israeli Ministry of Health were published, showing the extreme difficulties which the hostages went through in Gaza, and therefore everybody should be brought back, according to the families. But as we just mentioned, they're not very optimistic, as they're seeing the attempts being derailed once again.
Israel is reportedly trying to keep its forces in southern Lebanon, even after the ceasefire deal.
Yes, this is according to some reports in Lebanon. Some parliament members, mostly connected to Hezbollah, are saying that even after the end of January, when the 60-day ceasefire expires, Israel is planning to remain in Lebanon. The Israeli forces will remain in Lebanon. It has to be said that the Lebanese Prime Minister Najib Mikati denied the reports, and there was no comment whatsoever on behalf of Israel. What Israel is saying, especially through a Minister of Defense, Israel Katz, is that according to the ceasefire agreement, Israel has the right and even has the obligation of targeting Hezbollah warehouses, ammunition, and everything that accounts to a threat according to Israel. And this has been going practically every day since the ceasefire agreement came into effect more than a month ago. What will happen at the end of January once those 60 days are over, it is not exactly clear. No comment on behalf of Israel if its forces will remain in Lebanon or will not remain in Lebanon, but there are forces within Lebanon saying that Israel, loud and clear, is going to maintain its forces north of the border. No Israeli plan to draw its forces back. Whether it's true or not, we do know that at least the Israeli interpretation of the agreement is that even after the forces withdraw, if they withdraw, Israel will have the right to act in Lebanon if it sees a threat. What exactly constitutes a threat, that of course is up for interpretation.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, war and peace. After 3 years of fighting between Russia and Ukraine, what difference will a new United States president make?
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
For China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us. And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
You might think you are better informed in an information age. The fact is, people are more often misled by misinformation. You might think every voice is heard in a digital world. The fact is, many nations and peoples are still underrepresented. And data poverty shuts out many. We at CGTN are committed to transcending the information gap and the digital divide. CGTN, bridging nations and civilizations. CGTN, see the difference.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. The investigation begins into South Korea's deadliest aviation disaster. 179 passengers killed after this plane crashes on landing. Our other headlines: Israel continues to target hospitals in Gaza, killing at least 7 people in its latest attacks. Scuffles have broken out between the police and demonstrators in Georgia's capital as thousands of demonstrators protest against the inauguration of the country's new president. This follows allegations of fraud in the October election won by the ruling Georgian Dream Party. The former soccer player Mikhail Kavalashvili was sworn in on Sunday, while the outgoing president, Salome Zorobechvili, branded her successor illegitimate.
I plan to be everyone's president, regardless of whether they like me or not. My future efforts will be directed towards the consolidation and unification of society.
I am bringing legitimacy with me. I'm taking the flag with me. I'm taking your trust with me. There is a parody. In contrast to us, they are behind closed doors, frightened, sold out, illegitimate, unrecognised by anyone, sanctioned and bitter.
After 3 years of fighting between Ukraine and Russia, will a new United States president next month change this conflict? President-elect Trump has made clear his intention to bring both sides to the negotiating table as the number of casualties continues to mount. Our correspondent Yolo Abdavid reports.
Pokrovsk in East Ukraine is a ghost town. Most of the 60,000 residents have left as Russia attacks. Some stay despite the danger.
No gas, no heating. When we had gas, we could warm up water bottles. Now there's nothing.
The fighting is getting closer. Pokrovsk could follow the fate of Bakhmut and Mariupol. Russia isn't planning to end its attacks, as President Putin says he has hundreds of thousands registered to fight.
Last year, over 300,000 of our citizens came to the military registration and enlistment offices and signed contracts to serve in the armed forces. More than 300,000. This year, at the moment, there are already over 430,000, and this flow of volunteers is actually not stopping.
Ukraine's leader is concerned how military and political support for his country could change soon. In the past year, President Zelensky has modified his stance, from refusing a ceasefire to suggesting he would cede territory for peace, provided Ukraine is given NATO membership. When he's back in office, the United States President-elect Donald Trump has promised to end the war within 24 hours and expects a deal to be made.
What should Zelensky, if anything, be prepared to give up to ask?
We would be prepared to make a deal. That's all. Got to be a deal. No, got to be a deal. Too many people being killed. That is a war that's hard. Too many people. Got to make a deal. And Putin has to make a deal.
What deal would you think?
Putin has to make a deal, and Putin would have never gotten in if I was president.
While the world waits for more details as to what specifically is Trump's plan for Ukraine, both sides battle each other diplomatically in the United Nations.
The Ukrainian leadership is past its sell-by date and doesn't want to resolve the situation. In fact, it's rejected Hungary's proposal to introduce a Christmas ceasefire and an exchange of prisoners.
Ukraine has a shortage of soldiers, weapons, and worries that 60% of its energy infrastructure has been severely damaged. Speaking in mid-December, Ukraine's permanent representative to the United Nations highlighted the scale of recent attacks.
Friday's strike was the 12th carried out by Russia against our energy infrastructure in 2024 alone. For these strikes, Russia used about 1,100 missiles, both cruise and ballistic ones.
Meanwhile, civilians in Ukraine still suffer weekly missile attacks, and soldiers on both sides die in battle or are killed by bombs. Yolo Abdavid, CGTN.
Climate change brought record-breaking heat this year, and with it, extreme weather, from hurricanes to wildfires. Our correspondent Adis Tianshan looks back at some of the devastating meteorological events to hit the Americas.
Average global temperatures this year indicate 2024 will be the hottest on record, according to the World Meteorological Organization.
If we look at the past year and a half, so that November 2024 is the 16th month and 17th month that we are above 1.5.
That's the threshold established by the Paris Climate Agreement that's already set to be breached much sooner than scientists expected.
The oceans have been warming and absorbing a lot of the excess heat. So we have that component that not only is rapid intensification more likely, but storms are more likely to reach a higher intensity.
The hurricane season started out strong with Hurricane Beryl on July 1st, becoming the earliest Category 5 storm ever seen in the Atlantic. This year's hurricane season was unprecedented in many ways, with a total of 11 hurricanes, well above the annual average. Hurricane Milton became one of the strongest hurricanes to ever hit the Gulf of Mexico, with wind speeds reaching 290 kilometers an hour. That's 180 miles per hour. Just weeks later, Hurricane Helene caused catastrophic damage across several states, including North Carolina, and is the deadliest storm to hit the U.S. mainland since Katrina. South America wasn't spared either. In Brazil, massive wildfires in the Amazon region ravaged ecosystems, while Argentina and Chile suffered from severe droughts, crippling agricultural production and threatening food supplies. To address the global climate crisis, countries gathered at COP29 summit in Azerbaijan and agreed on an annual finance target of $300 billion to help poorer countries, drawing criticism from several developing nations.
That the developing country is saying that it's taking the lead with $300 billion till 2035 is a joke. And it's not something we should take lightly. I do not think it's something we should clap our hands and force us to take it.
Developed countries had previously committed to providing $100 billion a year in climate finance for poorer nations. That goal has been surpassed, but the climate crisis is not going away. It is Tianshan, CGTN, Los Angeles.
China has unveiled the prototype of the country's latest high-speed bullet train, the CR-450, capable of reaching speeds of up to 450 kilometers per hour. The train's tipped to be the world's fastest when it starts operations next year. Currently, China's fastest high-speed train runs at 350 kilometers per hour. The headlines again. The investigation begins into South Korea's deadliest air disaster. 179 passengers killed after this plane crashes on landing. Our other headlines: Israel continues to target hospitals in Gaza, killing at least 7 people in its latest attacks. And protests in Georgia as the country's new president is sworn in, while the incumbent has branded her successor illegitimate. And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. More news at the top of the hour. Coming up next, it's Razor. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.